Dan Burisch claims that Project Looking Glass was a top-secret government program that involved advanced technology capable of peering into potential future timelines. According to his account, the device operated using a complex combination of quantum mechanics, gravitational fields, and exotic materials, which allegedly allowed users to observe different probable outcomes rather than a fixed future. He suggests that the project was heavily used to predict significant global events, including the much-hyped 2012 phenomenon, and that it uncovered a critical timeline convergence, a point beyond which all possible futures supposedly merged into a singular outcome, potentially overriding free will. Burisch also links Project Looking Glass to his alleged work with J-Rod, a being he describes as a time-traveling extraterrestrial from the future. He claims that high-ranking elites sought to exploit the technology to shape or manipulate future events in their favor, but were ultimately unable to alter the inevitable timeline convergence. While mainstream science dismisses these claims due to a lack of verifiable evidence, some believe that elements of Burisch's story could be rooted in real, undisclosed research into exotic physics and time perception. Whether a grand conspiracy, a misinterpretation of classified projects, or a fabrication, Project Looking Glass continues to intrigue those fascinated by the possibilities of time manipulation and government secrecy.
Because people will then target toward a date, and there are people out there now that are saying, oh, it's right around the corner, at any moment now. Why won't the aliens save us?
Yeah.
We need to save ourselves. This was a quid pro quo for them to get certain information from that Kaela showed me. I demanded certain information back, and actually it was information concerning the time travel issue, because they were still trying to be, they were still reticent about informing me as to what the real nature of the situation was. As late as 2001, the Looking Glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc out of the top of it, where the word Yellow Book originally came from. Yes. Actually, I used that to our advantage at the T9, because that, in fact, was present at the T9, and I projected certain information which caused a little upset during the meeting, but I was also allowed to show them probable outcomes. So in fact, the Yellow Book, the cube, was used for that purpose. Shockingly, they happened to see themselves standing on the bones of their own families and things like that in the vision, and they ultimately decided to remove Lotus as well as certain abductions from the Tau 9 Treaty. They were handing this cube around from country to country to the elitists in the countries to look into their own futures so that they could pick the best paths for themselves. I'm happy to pass along the information. I'm honored to pass along the information that I understand that the Yellow Book is no longer accessible. I will say this to everybody, whomever took it, it's in safe hands and it won't be used to harm humanity.
How would you like to start? What's the best place to start as far as Stargates are
I've got it. Well, I've got a list of questions here in front of me, submitted by you two, all 30 of them. And, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned the number.
No.
They are decommissioned. They are separated into their three components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be the appropriate one to make comment as to how they work. But there were field posts that were positioned around the actual gates, and they have been stored, I guess. I'm not certain what happened to the field components, but of the 3 components, they've actually been decommissioned, and liaisons to the European Union, the United Nations, and NATO are actually in possession of them, and there is no one group which has one of the other 2 components.
Well, okay, so
everybody's staring at everybody, and they can't put the equipment together because everybody is mutually dependent and looking questioningly at everybody else. So everybody is literally protecting everybody else. Of the actual base operating equipment, there are 3 components to it, which is a projection device of some sort, a barrel, and a set of rings, electromagnetic rings.
Are we able to know how many man-made Stargates there were on the planet?
No. I'm not going to comment as to the total. I will say that there was over 50.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. In different countries of the world?
Yes.
Okay, and these are man-made?
Yes.
Okay, so, and natural Stargates?
Well, see, it's not a Stargate. It's a device which accesses.
Okay,
which
right.
accesses a portal, a wormhole,
Does it
or
access a natural, in other words, the man-made device
Yes.
accesses a natural Stargate?
It draws off from a
natural
natural ERB, an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Okay.
It accesses it and somehow works, from what I understand, not in parallel, but almost like piggybacks on the energy of the natural Stargate. Yeah.
Okay. So, in other words, if there were 50 man-made devices accessing, they would be accessing a corresponding 50 natural energy vortexes.
That I don't know. There's a possibility, in fact, that when the looking glass was operated, they were usually worked in tandem. It required a second looking glass to be turned on at the same time to get acoustics through. So unless a second one was turned on, which was operated at one of the places where Will Uhouse had been, he saw the second node location, as opposed to the first node being over at the Papoose facility. Two pieces of equipment, 2 looking glasses, were required to be turned on at the same time to be able to hear acoustics or sound, if you will, from whatever the people were watching, but to go to piggyback in tandem with the visual response to the equipment. That it required 2 to be turned on to hear anything. And then both sides could hear the same thing. So I suppose both of the looking glasses being tuned to the same thing was accessing the same tunnel, if you will, to the information.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so the looking glass has an ability to show one the future, but a Stargate or or equipment that accesses a Stargate or wormhole is for time travel, right? We're talking about 2 different things.
Yes.
Are they using the same technology?
Essentially, yes. The original device was the Stargate device. That was then increased in power, if you will, with the use of these field posts. And how it pumped up the power, how it stabilized it, I don't know. You'd need to speak with a physicist about that.
Okay, and
however,
it increased it enough to where it became a looking glass?
Well,
or had
no.
the abilities of a looking glass?
No. It would be pumped up in power to stabilize the doorway, if you will, to step through into another location,
Right.
which, in essence, because distance and time are relative, the same thing. Step 2 into another time. The looking glass device was a back-engineered Stargate.
Okay.
So it was actually back-engineered from the original cylinder seal data, which allowed us to produce the Stargate access devices, if you will, what we call the Stargates. It's a back-engineered device, the looking glass is. So the looking glass is a secondary device, and it was coming into its fore in the 60s and 70s. And Will saw one of the first generations of it. From what I understand, a very large piece of equipment. They always get smaller no matter what. I mean, look at what's happened with the computers.
Will saw?
Oh, yeah.
Will.
Will Uhouse.
U-House saw the original looking glass.
He saw one of the original looking glasses demonstrated, and in fact, it's going to be in the DVD that we're getting ready to put out, the actual interview, where he was indicating firing of a bullet, I believe it was, through an object. And there was a time delay where the bullet actually passed through the object, where he saw the bullet past the object, or the projectile, if you will, a rail gun, I believe is what was being, yeah, it was a rail gun that was being used. And then afterward, they saw the impact of the device. So they were already playing with it in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, with dealing with time sequences.
Wasn't the original looking glass a back engineered from alien technology?
Yes.
Okay, but it also there was information around the cylinder seals that they used as also, and that those cylinder seals also came from
Well,
an off-world race. Is that not
from well, no, the cylinder seals didn't. The information on them did.
came from?
Um,
Which was maybe the Anunnaki? Is that
I wouldn't feel comfortable in characterizing it
okay?
with that name.
Okay.
I really shouldn't go.
But it was off-world technology originally.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at this point, like, okay, say that was in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, you said.
Well, yes. That's when they started actually being you know, showing a lot of interest in actually building the equipment to be able to see over the curvature of time-space so that they could see into the future and somewhat into the past, but basically the future.
Okay. So there's also our Henry Deacon contact said there was a black box that came on one of the crafts. And I don't know if you're familiar with that black box. Did you have exposure to that as well?
Yeah,
So
it was something that we called the cube or the yellow disc or yellow cube, yes.
Okay, but then that was
I
not
have
a
had
looking
experience with
glass. Was that a looking glass?
That is a variant of the technology.
Okay.
However, whilst the looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities, the cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc out of the top of it, where the word yellow book originally came from.
Yeah.
And depending upon what predisposition, it's kind of like little Yoda telling young Luke, you bring in there what you have with you. You know, whatever is in there is what you bring. You could then change the perspective, the tilt, if you will, the orientation or angle of the information being presented back to you. So unless you are well prepared to deal with such a thing, human interaction and human emotions bring instability of the provenance of the information.
Okay, that's what went on with the black box, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, but with the looking
and
glass...
I used that to our advantage at the T9, because that in fact was present at the T9, and I projected certain information which caused a little upset during the meeting, and they got certain abductions removed and Lotus removed off the calendar and things like that. I caused some real trouble, in other words.
Can you elaborate? Are you willing to elaborate?
Let me sit here and consider what I should and should not. During the negotiations for the Tau 9-6, I was asked to supply a model for the Lotus. In fact, Marcia and I were both asked because they knew tangentially she was involved. I agreed to do so, which is what you respond when you're a sworn operative. It's yes. Unless there are great objections. I was then taken to the location where the treaty was actually being negotiated. give a short recitation as to the nature of Lotus. What was happening is the P-45Ks use Lotus. They wanted to use Lotus for the back engineering of their own neurological problem. I was objecting to its use, but still was under orders to provide a model. I was prepared to do so, but I was also allowed to show them probable outcomes. So in fact, the Yellow Book, the cube, was used for that purpose. Shockingly, they happened to see themselves standing on the bones of their own families and things like that in the vision, and they ultimately decided to remove Lotus as well as certain abductions from the Tau 9 Treaty. So we were successful in getting certain things removed. I think I can safely mention at this time, because we're only one OF9 and one Tau 9 Treaty away from the passage through the completion of the passage through the galactic plane. So I think I'm pretty well safe to go ahead and mention it now. They're not going to be able to get it back put on the treaties and all of that in the time that we have left. In other words, they got outfoxed. And that's what happens when you're negotiating in treaties.
So you use the capacity of the Yellow Book or Little Black Box to show them the future implications of what using the Lotus to amplify or to rectify their own biological problems.
This is true, and that was skewed by, it takes a great deal of emotion to skew the imagery and the audio that comes with it. But I'll just say that I'm extremely vehement with regard to my objection for the Lotus being used, and apparently that vehemence was sufficient to skew the image enough to get them to jump back aghast and in horror. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, okay. And this kind of, like, just for the sake of the audience to some degree, you have seen in, I guess, the Yellow Book or in the Looking Glass, and you can correct me which one it is, the future of Lotus, in a sense. How Lotus becomes, once it's brought to the fore by you.
Well, actually, no.
No,
I haven't. The reports to me which came concerning the future of Lotus, which we're not going to get into in depth this evening, was given to me as information.
Oh, so you didn't see it?
Personally see it, no.
Okay.
I was told.
I see.
I was told. That was during the early years, I say the early years of Lotus. It's only been going on for 6 years now.
Right.
But this was the latter half of 2001. And this was a quid pro quo for them to get certain information from that Kaela showed me. I demanded certain information back, and actually it was information concerning the time travel issue, because they were still trying to be, they were still reticent about informing me as to what the real nature of the situation was, as late as 2001.
Meaning the real situation was, meaning how much access to Stargate, to time travel that they actually had?
Right, the whole treaty system, the situations involving the treaties, their outcomes, the actual potential for both timeline number 1 and timeline number 2 outcomes. In the case that we're in right now, we seem to be in a variant of timeline 1, and that's good. For everything that I've seen and have read and reported to me concerning timeline number 1, it's not happening exactly the way that they figured that it would. But then again, it couldn't, because we've made changes along the way, which diverted us away from timeline number 2. And in so doing, our future, again, I regard our future as something which is pretty much a blank slate. We're writing it for ourselves. And so we are now seeing something coming to pass which is slightly different than the prognostication, than the probabilities that we were seeing. And I'm good with what we're seeing so far, but we are still faced with the challenges, the environmental degradation, etc.
Okay.
But hopefully we will rise to the challenge.
Okay, so this is interesting, because it sounds like Kaela was instrumental in getting you to have greater access to intelligence about what the Looking Glass was telling MJ-12.
Yeah, it was the information that he was providing me which provoked questions. And the fact that they didn't even want to get into long-winded discussions with me in the late 90s concerning what he even was. After we had argued for years to find out even where the material was coming from, then we were finally given access to the material. I mean, this went on for a few years.
Meaning, okay, but your interaction with Kaela was leading you one way and giving you one set of information, and MJ12 then had another set. Isn't that right?
Well, they weren't really, it wasn't that they had another set of information. He did tell me basically what was going on.
Okay.
And they were simply not providing that information as what they considered a need-to-know situation.
I see. So
they just weren't going to tell me what they didn't feel I needed to know.
But little did they, well, this is my paraphrase, but little did they know that Kaela was basically cluing you in.
He was cluing me in, and he was informing me his perspectives concerning the treaties. So I knew something was going on. And that is ultimately what they wanted to know about. And I said, well, for you to know about that kind of thing, then I need to know about certain other things. It's, you know, it was truly a quid pro quo situation. And they said, well, okay, we'll tell you if you tell us.
Right.
So I told them, and they told me a little more.
Wonderful.
And it was right around that same time that Lotus was actually kicking into fore. The May 31st, 2001 event that took my prosaic project and basically threw it in the garbage can, and it turned into what it is now, this project that it is now. And as a result, I also found out from them where they said Lotus was ultimately destined. And that is, like I said, we'll discuss that in a slightly future date.
But isn't it true to some extent that Lotus could help Kaela now?
That was the perspective of the P-45 J-rods, and that is not my perspective.
I see. So, because I make a distinction between Kaela, who's what I understand a P-52, and the P-45. So, but they're on the same,
they were on the same timeline, the same track, but just separated by 7,000 years.
Okay, so even so,
which is quite a big separation.
What we got, so what you're saying is that in a sense, Kaela couldn't get the benefits of Lotus because...
Nor did he ask for it.
Okay.
Nor did he ask for it. And you know, I will say this. This is something that David spoke with David on the phone not that long ago. I'll leave the last name off. I think you know who I'm...
Sure, but we can use his name if it's okay with you.
Well, sure, David Wilcock.
Okay, yeah, because we just interviewed him.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yeah. And he was talking. We were discussing the same thing, which was the box, the cube. And I said, you know, a strange thing happened. I was pro tempore made MJ9 for the 12 as a result of a bet that went on within MJ12. And I got a chance to tap who ended up being the last MJ9 prior to the adjournment. And before tapping her, who was the first female to ever set in the 12, I got a chance to look at certain documents and look through certain archives in Washington, D.C. prior to going across to the continent and meeting with some folks and telling them basically I wasn't interested in their offers. I'm talking about a trip to Brussels.
The Illuminati?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during the same time, the cube disappeared, and it hasn't been seen since. And it disappeared out of the archives. Of course, I have no idea. I have no idea where the item may be, but I do know this: I'm happy that they can't find it, because what they were doing is they were handing this cube around, and this is a question that Bill had asked, whether there was only one cube. They were handing this cube around from country to country to the elitists in the countries to look into their own futures so that they could pick the best paths for themselves. Why don't they just live their lives and try to be good people? Why do they need a little black box to tell them when to jump and how to jump? That's not being fully human, or at least from my perspective and those of our associates. That's not being fully human.
Yes.
So, as I understand it, disappeared. Now, there have been certain, allegations that have been made that during the time when I had, it's almost a year ago now, when I had the bad seizure.
Yes.
It was near the end of last year, was it? No.
I think it was about a year.
It was about a year ago, and I had a very severe seizure and was actually put out of commission seriously for a while. And there was a big hullabaloo to get over to my apartment to get something out of my apartment. What that object was, I won't comment. But I will say this to everybody, whomever took it, it's in safe hands and it won't be used to harm humanity.
All right.
In fact, the fact that it's in safe hands will prevent it from being used to harm humanity. It has been thus far only used, aside from, well, I mean, I've got to try to justify my own behavior in Bandolier of using it for the purposes of skewing to get Lotus off and the abductions off, but I think that was for a beneficial cause.
Right.
But it has been used since actually the 50s by the potentates, by the leaders of the various countries to skew the history
Wow, that's amazing.
of the human race.
All right.
And the common folk, the average people, all of us, have a right to a future which is our own, and not being skewed and designated and promulgated and promoted and provoked by blue bloods who feel that they are above everyone else.
Well, thank you, Dan.
You're
for
welcome.
that. I think we probably all owe you a great thanks for that. Dan.
No, I'm happy to pass along the information. I'm honored to pass along the information that I understand that the Yellow Book is no longer accessible.
Yes.
That's all I know about it, though.
I understand. I totally understand, and thank you for that information.
That may be the reason too why the Illuminati hasn't done something to us, and it may also be the reason on the other end why the old Magi haven't, and it may be why they're also quiet and
Right. They
I don't know.
have the upper hand anymore, in essence.
The people should have the upper hand. And they should have the upper hand for their own destiny. And that's why we too have gone as far as what we have to expose the NSSM 200 report, which was put in during the Ford administration, which I believe was written by Dr. Henry Kissinger, wherein he suggested the possible use of food as a weapon. And its use against, in fact, as a tool against the third world. Now, at the same time, we notice that there's a correlation going on. You can find this from the IPCC report concerning global warming, that if the world average temperature rises, I believe, between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius, that the northern hemisphere, the higher latitude growth will increase. However, if it goes over that, it will decrease. Yet the lower latitudes, by the way, that's where you find most of the third world countries, the 2 to 3 degree Celsius increase will cause starvation and crop loss.
Okay.
Now, isn't this funny?
Yeah.
How they're just allowing the global warming to increase with the provoking with the use of fossil fuels. I'm not saying that's the total cause. It's not. There are cycles involved, short as well as long-term cycles. But isn't that funny? And it's my best guess that they'll probably order just enough ameliorative steps to be taken where it levels off, where the higher latitude or the higher latitudes probably don't lose their crops, where you find the majority of the rich countries.
Interesting. Well, that's actually a fascinating political observation. I think that it is also interesting that most of the crops are being grown, though, in the lower latitudes. They're not being grown in North America anymore.
Right, but you have sustainability, though.
Sure.
Whereas when you have the loss of the crops in the lower latitude, you're also losing a lot of the population from the third world, which unfortunately, according to the way that the documents read, some people find them expendable.
Right. Well,
We don't feel that way.
That's the Iron Mountain report also talks about things of that nature. And you're familiar with that.
I've heard of it.
Well, it's freely available on the net to be read, and it talks about that, something very similar to that.
Right. I'm not one that likes to interject myself in politics at all.
No,
I like
I
the
know
state of
that.
the
I
state of
know
the
that.
research.
But at the same time.
Well, at the same time, I mean, when we start hearing that the codex is being placed in place, which actually delimits food value. Oh, you can have all the food you want and starve to death while you're eating it if there's no nutrients.
Right. Absolutely.
When I start hearing that food is being used as a weapon, and it's being used concerning the use of fossil fuels, I start getting personally angry. There's not one person in the lower latitudes that's worth any less than me.
Right.
You know, everybody is worth exactly the same thing on this earth,
Yep.
and unfortunately, there are individuals who feel otherwise.
I understand. Okay, so Bill, the question you were asking, now that we've kind of, let's talk about, first of all, you mentioned Will Uhouse.
The son of Bill Uhouse.
The son of Bill Uhouse, who's
Right,
very
right.
well known.
Bill
so
who?
we didn't realize that he was actually, it was the son you were saying
Yes.
who had access to that technology.
Yes. Bill was the builder of the avionics and the testing equipment, the back engineered ARV testing equipment, the avionics. I actually saw some of the equipment, and this is in the tape that Marcia and I did with him in a room. I actually saw some of the equipment, some of the diagnostic equipment in the B bay underneath the Galileo bay that he actually built. And so when I started describing it, Will looked at me and said, "Oh, that's what my dad built." So we had a very nice little connection there.
So are you saying?
But it's Will who had experience around the looking glass equipment in the 70s. His son, Bill Uhouse's son.
And Will Uhouse is alive now.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So that's very interesting.
And
That
his
means-
wife, Terry, they in fact, from what I understand, they met during the course of conversations concerning our information coming to the public, Terry and Will met one another, fell in love, and were married. That makes me feel kind of personally really good.
Okay, well, so it sounds like Will knows quite a bit about what makes the ARV run then, if his father had something to do with the back engineering.
Yes.
Okay, so in 1947, when
Yes.
the cube was discovered, it must have really screwed up the idea of the two timelines by bringing in the ability to, I mean, I don't know what the cube can and can't do.
Well, first of all, the cube wasn't actually was not discovered in 1947. There's a mixture of the stories involved. The cube was actually, the information about the cube, its existence, was known as of 1946. It was further discussed in 1947 after a certain crash in midwestern, lower southwestern state, New Mexico, and following which, during the first brokering for treaties by the Orions with Eisenhower, the cube was handed to Eisenhower. It was in fact expected to go to the United Nations authorities, and it was in fact spirited away by the United States military.
Okay.
They didn't hand it over.
So, but the way you're talking about the cube is that it sounds like it connects emotionally with the viewers in a sense.
It does, and the fact that it was handed, it was actually Orion technology.
Okay.
And it was handed over by them in the spirit of goodwill, but a misassessment as to our evolutionary state, our ability to handle the issue and handle the equipment. They felt us more balanced than what we actually were.
Okay, well this is, I mean, this opens almost Pandora's box in a sense of United States history.
That is Pandora's box. Yes, and I'm not exactly certain what was seen relative to the cube for 9/11. However, the analysis which I was asked to do, of course I've paid the price now that I've actually done it. Again, people don't want to hear the answers that I came up with, but the analysis that I did indicated that certainly there's at minimum a great suspicion concerning the delay of response. And the information that I have directly from one of the former seated members was in fact that we were aware, but this was looking glass technology, not the cube.
I understand.
That we were aware as of the middle 1990s that there would be a coming Islamic extremist war with the United States. We were also aware of certain alternative situations that they used the statistics from the looking glass, from the variability between the different pictures, to show that would be occurring at the same time, another probability at the same time. And from their perspective, that the least of the two consequences was 9/11. I am aware of what the other possible consequence was. I'm not willing to come out and start mentioning it because I don't know what the consequences are of speaking the things that have not thus far happened, yet the probabilities existed that they could.
Yeah. No,
So,
I hear you.
you know, I'm feeling a little bit, there's a little weight when it comes to that. But
Okay, you're saying though that the looking glasses have been, as you called it, decommissioned.
yes, ma'am,
And that means across the board.
across the board,
Okay.
they are shut down.
And you said there was 50 man-made devices, and I'm assuming
I said at least 50.
that would access or create stargates, in essence, out of natural vortexes.
Yes.
And
They would suck them in or make
but
them
if you have
available.
Looking glass, and a looking glass is not the same as a stargate.
No, a looking glass is a back-engineered form from the original cylinder seal descriptions on how to build the units that they made Stargate. So in essence, you could take a looking glass
Yes.
unit and make a couple changes to the equipment,
Okay.
lift it up on an angle,
Okay.
put field posts around it, and open up a hole to step through.
Sure. Okay, but the looking glass can show you the future. So are we saying
Future
that
probabilities, not the future.
Okay, so are we saying there were 50 looking glasses in operation as well?
Oh no, there were much less.
Okay, much
Yeah,
less.
we had a basic monopoly over the looking glass, that and India. India brokered early on with Indira, when Indira Gandhi was brokering the Committee of the Majority between the United States and the Soviet Union, because the Soviets were threatening to start their own treaty system up with the extraterrestrials, which would have become untenable. We agreed then to expand MJ-12 from a wholly operated and owned American operation to an international operation, and thus was born the Committee of the Majority between 1963 and 1967. And when that information was brokered, that happened in parallel with, kind of under the table, but in parallel with the United Nations treaties involving things like the Test Ban Treaty and the Outer Space Treaty. And so it was being done at the same time under cover of UN support. The diplomats were going back and forth and brokering the opening up so that the treaty system would be a single treaty system and thus tenable and manageable to hopefully a good outcome. And we'll be knowing within the next few years whether that was successful.
Okay, so this is really fascinating. You're saying that some other countries, India for one, had access to looking glass technology.
Yes, ma'am.
As
They
far
had that
back
written in as far back as the 1960s and 70s, when it was actually being back engineered from the Stargate material. And so at the same time that Will Uhouse, for instance, was looking at the early generation looking glass, India had the same.
Okay, and are you at liberty to say what other countries had access to that?
To the information or to the equipment?
To the looking glass, to a looking glass, or the ability to create a looking glass and look back, look at time, look forward into their own histories.
No,
Is
because
that without exception?
And I'll tell you why the answer is no. Within the treaties, the looking glass, as well as the Stargates, as well as the cube, and information movement pods, are all contained within the treaty system. Within that treaty system, it also prohibits and allows certain passage of information amongst delegates on where the looking glass material is and where the information flow is, what the access is. Being that I stood in Bandolier, I'm considered a delegate, therefore I cannot tell you.
The main difference between Project Looking Glass and the Cube, or Yellow Book, in Dan Burisch's claims lies in how they supposedly functioned and were used. Project Looking Glass was described as a government-built device that used exotic physics and quantum mechanics to view potential future timelines. It allegedly allowed users to observe probabilities of future events, but not interact with them. Burisch claimed that by 2012, Looking Glass became ineffective due to a timeline convergence, meaning all future possibilities merged into a singular path. The Cube Yellow Book was said to be an alien artifact supposedly given to humanity by extraterrestrials, possibly the J-Rods. Unlike Looking Glass, the Cube was reportedly interactive, allowing users to see personal or global future events based on their consciousness and intent. Burisch and others claimed that it was once misused by world leaders for political gain before being removed or hidden to prevent further manipulation. In short, Looking Glass was a government-built predictive device focused on timelines, while the Cube was an alien artifact that could provide visions of the future in a more personal and direct way. Both, however, remain unverified claims within conspiracy circles.
Okay. So you can't tell me who has
No.
access to that technology.
Aside from India and the United States.
Right. Okay.
No.
So, but we can assume that some countries, perhaps, that is the leadership of some countries, may have had access to this technologies at some point.
I think that it's fair to say that we can assume that they had access to the information from it, but I wouldn't place any characterization over any assumption of whom may or may not have had it.
Okay. All right. Well,
I thank you for the question, though.
Okay, but it also gives you a whole different way of looking at history. I mean, certainly.
Indeed, it does.
You know. I mean, this stuff is got to be, you know, as natural to you as, you know, getting up in the morning, you know, and having a cup of coffee. This is all part of your worldview.
Now, there's nothing as natural to me as getting up and having my cup of coffee. I'm sorry.
Okay, but
and we should have never built. We should. The Stargate, yes. Okay, for the purpose of speaking with the visitors from the other timelines, yes, absolutely. The Looking Glass, no. That was done because of our own shortcomings as people who aspire to things that we maybe shouldn't try to grab a hold of.
Well,
it should have never been built.
Gives you power, right? We're talking about power and the misuse of power here.
Yes.
I mean, bottom line, right?
Yes.
So
and I am an advocate against that misuse.
Right.
In fact, well, I could say against the misuse. I am an advocate against its use, period.
Okay, so let's say that one has the Looking Glass, and you're saying it shows probabilities. And one of the things we were wondering is, how does it do that?
Well, from the best I understand, and I was speaking with Bill just a little while about it, a little while ago, the rings and the amount of information via energy, which is passed into it, and I've got to be very, very careful with this. The position of the rings, their orientation, the energy running through them, position of the barrel, etc., because you can raise the barrel up on an armature inside the center of it, all come into play as if you have an onion with the various layers of the onion. As you move through the different energy levels, you also move through the different layers, so you get different bits of information. Now imagine an almost infinite number of layers overlain in comparison to the positions of the rings, and an almost infinite amount of energy that you can add or subtract. Tuning it up, tuning it down.
Well, it sounds
instead of going up by 1 hertz or by 2 hertz, maybe by a thousandth of a hertz, up and down.
But it sounds like you're working with almost like a kaleidoscope effect. You know, like a kaleidoscope, a real kaleidoscope. The way you would turn and twist and focus, and each time you get a different design, right?
Well, right, except
Each time the colors are changed.
Yeah, you get a different design and the colors change, but it's like working with multiple kaleidoscopes, where when you find 2 different probabilities that you would run into, you have 2 kaleidoscopes, and you make a change on one kaleidoscope that may factor or function to a different angular change on another kaleidoscope, so you get 2 separate pictures that you then have that are flashing back and forth.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay, so
best analogy to that.
Is there an interface with a computer to get these readouts in terms of probability?
Yeah, in fact, there's a deinterlacing system which they used to actually deinterlace the flashing back and forth of the 2 probabilities, or the multiples that they had at certain times when it starts skipping.
You could freeze them, right? So you could look at them closer.
Well, what they did is they deinterlaced the video and then reintegrated the video and watched the individual videos then.
Yes, yes.
And then determined statistically how much time was spent on each video to determine the amount of probability of each event occurring. And they tested that against probabilities in the field and probabilities of future occurrence to get a system which functioned scientifically. And that's...
Okay, so, well, I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to actually say what they might have been doing is then looking back to see, in other words, if they saw an event in the Looking Glass, all they had to do was calibrate or look at the different possibilities, see which one happened, and then
That's what they did.
as time went on.
Absolutely.
And
That's
then
right on.
chart it.
That's right on.
Yeah.
That is right on the beam.
Okay.
And you know, some people,
they
like I
got
said,
good
some
at
people
it.
say it's blue smoke and mirrors. But then again, I was told something in 2001 that's I'm living in right now.
Okay.
Okay, without
Fascinating.
going to
Yes.
what it is.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we'll talk about that in the future. But you know, it's the best scientific equipment that I can imagine for the determining of such a thing. Mm-hmm. But it goes to the old question: just because we have the power to do something, should we?
Sure.
And I am a 100% advocate. She and I had a more than a small dust-up out at Frenchman Mountain over this very same thing, which actually resulted in me walking alone down Lake Mead back toward Las Vegas, with she and I yelling and screaming at each other along the roadside. They were doing tests out at Frenchman Mountain during the time that the Rosen Bridge was being accessed there, the Einstein-Rosen Bridge, with the equipment. They had the curtains up and all of that business, and up where Metro couldn't see it from the top of the mountain and all of that. And they were accessing there, and there was a mistake and a small explosion out there on the east side of this little, what we call the Conquistador helmet. And she wanted me to go out there with her to help clean some of the evidence up of it. And she and I got in more of a little dust up because I didn't want anything to do with it. Because I don't believe, I'm no Luddite, I mean, I'm all for grand technology, but I don't believe in playing with things which actually deal with looking into the future. And there's another issue that was going on at the time, in fact, that the variety of communication which was going on via this equipment from elsewhere, I presume she will still won't admit to me, but I presume that it was from Orion, and it was information, defense-related information on how this type of equipment, how an Einstein-Rosen bridge at a distance could be used to pull information out of a defense computer system. Uh-huh. And I don't mean a U.S. defense computer system. And I said, you know what? No. Look, we've got the technology here, we've got the talent, we've got the willpower, and we've got the willing to defend our own country without the use of something involving time technology. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to go up against, for instance, God help us, the Chinese on the ground. But at the same time, I don't fear their country either. I believe that we should be diplomatic with them and have a firm understanding and a respect for one another. But I also don't fear them. And so the use of a technology like that is not honorable to me.
Right. Well, it's like knowing how the game plays out means you can play your advantage ahead of time, mm-hmm. and making sure that eventuality will occur.
That's why I was so interested in when I was doing my time with the jobs involving safety and security training and all of that here in Las Vegas, when I was interacting with Marcia and the I. Because we were literally on a daily basis talking about that same thing and about the psychology of individuals who come to a table to play a game and who cheat to alter the outcome of the game. And that whole psychology, it's something which I'm not, is not foreign to me. And so that helped, if you will, prime the wick of the explosion between myself and that variety of technology, which actually primed my disagreement with it.
Dan Burisch's claims about Project Looking Glass include the idea that the technology utilized principles from the Einstein-Rosen bridge, more commonly known as a wormhole. In his narrative, Burisch suggests that the Looking Glass device exploited the theory of wormholes to access different points in space-time, allowing it to view potential futures. An Einstein-Rosen bridge is a theoretical passage through space-time, often referred to as a wormhole, that connects distant parts of the universe or even different timelines. In the context of Looking Glass, Burisch claimed that the device used this concept to create a window or a gateway that could access alternate timelines or possible futures. Essentially, the looking glass would tap into these bridges in space-time, allowing its users to see not just present or past events, but the unfolding of potential future scenarios by exploiting the wormhole-like properties of the device. However, these claims remain highly speculative and are not backed by any empirical evidence. The Einstein-Rosen bridge itself is still a theoretical concept in physics and has not been shown to function in the way described by Burisch or other conspiracy theorists. The idea of using wormholes or space-time manipulation for future prediction exists more in the realm of science fiction than established science.
Okay, well, I understand what you're saying, and there's a million questions that all of this generates.
Oh, I know.
I know we don't have all night, but I would like to ask.
Yeah, there's 30 of them here.
Knowing, but now that I know what I know and what you've at least communicated, you're saying you don't want to use the looking glass for advantage over country to country, but what about country to off-world?
No. It shouldn't be used at all.
I understand, but
all right.
But is there something there? I mean, in other words, is this technology something that they are using now to look at our relationships with, because they've been
the technology
closed
is not
down.
being used at all right now.
Okay, but the reason it's not used now is because of where we're going into the galactic, the plane of the...
Yeah. As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment will probably all get reassembled, yeah.
Turned back on.
Oh, sure.
2017? That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
Oh, not until then?
Probably not.
Meaning...
I'm figuring that they're probably going to act conservatively on this. That's what all of the people of wisdom have suggested to them.
Oh, wow.
Is to act conservatively. That, yes, the so-called cycle of catastrophe or season of catastrophe of Falconelli, the time period from, right around 1992 to right around 2012, right around that area, while we will have passed 2012, we really ought to get through the entire cycle, which is about 1980 to about 2016, to feel confident that the interpretation from the timeline from the future about their own catastrophe is not off by a few years. We're talking about 45,000 years or 52,000 years respectively. We have difficulty understanding what happened 2,000 years ago. And we're talking about 50,000 years here. So it's very wise for them to wait.
Okay, and you mean the looking glasses are now decommissioned, but also the Stargate technology?
Yeah, they're decommissioned, and the Stargates and the looking glasses, I'm sure they're all in their little mothballed containers and all of that, and they have been separated. The three components of each have been separated and moved to different power structures, diplomatic and military authorities in the world. And we're talking about the EU specifically, the UN and NATO. Those are in specific control of one of the three components each. And I cannot comment as to which component is contained by whom.
Okay, but you're saying there's no doubt whatsoever that all this technology has been decommissioned.
There is no doubt whatsoever when it comes to the looking glasses and when it comes to the Stargate technology that it has been decommissioned. And however, there are a few threats going on, ongoing threats from present countries stating that they will put it together at their will, do their own self-determination. And those countries, if push comes to shove, will be shoved.
Okay, meaning put it together now?
As in build one themselves now.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, what was extant has been collected. I'm under very good assurance that what was sitting there has now been collected and decommissioned.
Okay, and we're assuming Iraq is one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Basically, they were able to pinpoint in the looking glass the very highest probability for those things to occur.
That's true. That's true. And Bill was asking about a future date involving another thing, and a year was given to me. And he was saying, well, if a year can be provided for that,
Right.
why wouldn't a year be provided for the other? Well, there was a highest probability year for it. However, telling me about something that might happen in the future involving a project which we're currently involved is one matter.
Sure.
Willy-nilly throwing a date out, which is a probability involving the lives and the destiny of all of us here on the earth, and specifically to a predicted 4.5 or 4 billion people death, is another matter.
Okay.
That carries an entire different weight with it.
But are we to assume that we've passed that year yet? Or is
You're
that still
not
up
to no, you're not to assume.
No. Okay,
that.
so that's still in the offing. What we're looking at is a very low probability of the event,
Yes.
the event or the set of events
Yes.
occurring
Yes.
at this point.
Yes, we're looking at a low probability of the higher catastrophic portion of the events occurring. I expect that the events which would kick it off are still going to happen. For instance, the solar max, which is coming at around 2012, and the expected loss of GPS equipment and things like that, which is out there as part of on the web. You can find that as Engadget, I think, was one of the groups that spoke about the loss of GPS and satellite communication.
Meaning electromagnetic grid is going to go down.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
and that would be the time that I would expect the highest probability of the T2 event having correlated to the history of the J-Rods and the Orions. But that's as far as I
Really?
can.
Wow. Okay, well that's pretty
I
close.
can't give a date though.
Yeah, I understand.
I can, but I shouldn't. Because
yeah.
people will then target toward a date. And there are people out there now that are saying, oh, it's right around the corner at any moment now. Why won't the aliens save us?
Yeah.
We need to save ourselves.
Okay. Very
And
good.
that's why the steps have been taken in the world and are still underway so that we will save ourselves. Rotating ring-like devices where men with military equipment walk through and meet Ra on the other side and bring their nuclear weapons with them. No. They were used for passing information and passing inhabitants this direction.
Oh, by other cultures coming this way, but not by us going elsewhere.
By P+45s and P+52s, both Orions and J-Rods. The treaties were basically inflicted on us by the Orions. As they were enforced upon us by the Orions that we needed to do what we needed to do, when they figured out that we weren't able to handle the issue ourselves, they looked at their own history and said, huh, look at the cavemen and women. Then I found out that because he had carried the attitude that the Magi were not closely watching anything which was like NEOs or any, the near-Earth orbiting asteroids or anything like that. They weren't concerned about it at all. Well, then subsequently during a conversation, I found out that in fact they were. The information from her relative was in fact that they were aware that there would be an Islamic attack upon the United States as early, meaning they were aware as early as the mid-1990s that it would be coming sometime in the new millennium. Well, right on, smack on the beam. The Orions could trust us so much where they could hand us a cube and we misused it to the state that we misused it. where they then had to inflict a treaty system upon us.
But the moon's not like, you know, the most inhabitable planet. out
No,
there.
but it's the place that we're allowed to be right now.
Okay.
Do I sound like I'm weighing my words? That our emotions affect our state, our physical state. That our orientation to the energies which are available from the cosmos, if you will, affect the state of our DNA, affect the state of our health, and they are applying that as an experimental protocol, a rubric, if you will, to change the state of the people on board so that they can sample them for biological material.
I have a question about the probabilities, Dan. The low probability.
When you ask a question, I really serious.
The low probability, according to what I understand, what you said earlier, is 19%. Is that still valid? Because that's still playing Russian roulette with one bullet in a barrel of 5.
Is it not? And actually it's slightly worse than that. In all honesty, it's slightly worse than that because there's only an 85% confidence level to that 19%.
So that doesn't quite sound like we can all relax.
I don't think it's no, I don't think it's a question. I think we need to do the right things, and there was a correlation to the successful and unsuccessful outcomes, which involved the people of the world being united in purpose for survival and for care for our world. And that's the reason why we did this crazy thing. And I you know, it sounded crazy, it looked crazy, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. And I ended up having to send a team of people out, canvassing the regular people of the world and handing flyers out stating that the time had arrived for us to pray for unity. And I would still encourage that seriously and sincerely. You know, I lost people. I was in charge of a team, and some of them died as a result, well, a couple of them from accidents, and that, you know, can happen anywhere. But a couple of them were put to death for proselytizing. And so I bear that on my soul now.
For put to death for proselytizing
In
unity?
a country where
Meaning
where
China.
There was in fact 2 deaths in China, and we also lost some people in Saudi Arabia and a couple other places. I didn't make public how many all we lost or how many all we had, but they did their jobs, and the information was handed out, and we did the best we could. Anyway, you were asking
Okay.
about the Stargate, the possible locations and all of that. On June 16th of 2003, in RV number 0403, Deborah was requested to do a remote viewing session, a sole one, a series of them, in fact, that she conducted, and she found several locations. Among them was, in fact, Voloshanka. Then she even said to the north by the tundra in Russia, and in the southwest Tibetan mountains. I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit thinking about my men and women. I don't know how to pronounce this. Mosjoen, Mosjoen in Norway. And that was a big hullabaloo. There was one actually, the equipment was actually removed from there.
So what you're
Syria,
saying,
Turkey.
You're saying she remote viewed the locations of these the Stargate.
In fact, she did. And the reason why I reacted to pull this out, in your question, number 9, it says how many LGs were there? How many man-made Stargates? Where are they? And you gave a list of possible countries. In that list, you mentioned Bulgaria.
Right.
Well, on the second page of it, she's got the Pirin Mountains in Bulgaria listed. So I just wanted to kind of let you know.
Thank you.
And a couple points in Egypt, and she didn't, in fact, in this one mention Iraq because she was working separately for Iraq. On February the 4th of 2003, she did a special RV. Says, I came up with the following in my session. I saw a place 10 miles south-southeast of Baghdad. This, by the way, is a place where we ended up actually raiding and removing what they thought were rings for what they called weapons of mass destruction. Well, there were rings, all right, but it was a different kind of weapon of mass destruction. I pictured a big tree on the ground surface of this location. Now think about how Saddam was finally found.
Yes.
Behind the tree, there was a hole in the ground that had a piece of wood over it. I saw a man looking and feeling like Saddam have a guard lift the wood over the hole. Saddam then entered the hole and jumped into what looked like a platform at the top of a set of stairs. In remote viewing, I don't remote view, but in remote viewing, from everything I understand from her, time gets mixed up, overlaid, and sometimes
Yes.
off-shifted.
Yes.
And she clearly saw him in the spider hole. She also indicated that she found the work area down there and in fact drew the work area, which they ended up finding the one gate in Iraq.
Okay.
Interesting stuff,
Yeah,
huh?
absolutely. So we are kind of getting off the topic a little bit.
That's good.
Of, of Stargates and all that. We
Am I
know
causing that?
I'm sorry?
So am I causing that? I hope not.
We know that Kaela escaped through a Stargate with your assistance. That was described in one of our last videos.
Yeah.
And
E.T. went home.
Yes, E.T. went home.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about that is that you also had an experience in which you sort of fell into the Stargate and then kind of didn't go all the way, so you stayed in this reality.
Well, kind of.
Kind of.
I was expelled several yards away onto a slab of, it was either limestone or granite, I'm not really sure, or sandstone. All I know is that it was hard when I landed on it. And it was on the other side of the tarpaulin over, the area was separated, human ET side, for the actual staging around the Stargate. It was the military operation. And I ended up on the other side of the barriers, which were like raised curtains, so that the people around the area who were actual inhabitants of the area couldn't see. And I landed on that, and I moaned or groaned or was wondering where I was, and was in fact then approached by men in guns who were very upset with me. But
okay, but you saw the inside of a wormhole, right? Momentarily?
oh, I can't really say that. There was a gray curtain, almost a misty type curtain, very similar to what I remember during the time that I was in a coma back in the 70s. And I saw certain things on the other side, but it was a flash, and that was about it, and nothing really remarkable to talk about.
Okay, so you never went through, all the way through. I mean, I'm asking, did
No,
you,
I was
have you?
No,
I
I
know
did
you
not
had that
end up, I do
experience.
not remember ending up anywhere else.
Have you ever gone through a
No,
Stargate
no,
in your capacity?
no.
No.
And no, there are no rotating ring-like devices where men with military equipment walk through and meet Raw on the other side and bring their nuclear weapons with them. No. There are, yes, I'm being derogatory towards Serpo.
Well, I thought that you were talking about Stargate.
Well, that's what Serpo came from. I mean, this list of, well, we've got our nuclear weapon with us and all of this business, and they could have picked something better than the name Serpo if they were going to go with it. But Serpo it's a reptile park in, what is it, Argentina or the Netherlands? It's the name of a reptile park.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was picked more by the former ops who were actually putting the disinfo together, and what they did is they just simply took a name and they turned it backwards. It was Opress.
Okay,
it's
but
a
there was
it's
no
a K4
Stargate
code.
in Serpo, in the Serpo story. as told to people.
Okay.
Okay, but
No, there's no Stargate in the circle.
that's what I said.
Yeah, sorry.
So what I'm asking is, we have Stargates, okay, that have been decommissioned,
Yeah.
okay, which access time travel technology.
Yeah.
Okay. These Stargates, before they were decommissioned, we must assume were used.
They were used for passing information and passing inhabitants this direction.
Oh, by other cultures coming this way, but not by us
By
going elsewhere?
by P plus 45s and P plus 52s, both Orions and J-Rods.
What about all the other, I mean, I don't know if you're party to this, but how many other races are out there?
I am aware of one interdimensional species that won't speak with us directly and was communicating via the Orions, the P plus 52 Orions. That's it.
Okay, so
You know,
you're-
and I've been 20 years. It's confusing to me because I've got so many people with such great certitude. And I've been 20 years around these people, and either they were the greatest hiders in the world, even while drunk, and some of them drunk and recreationally drunk. And that's the way I should put that. Comes with large amounts of money. Sometimes they pay for products to make them feel good or whatever. I have never, it's been a joke. I hate to put it this way, but a lot of the UFO community, like to them, the stories have been a joke. And a lot of them have been proffered by the folkloristics unit in Majestic. They actually promulgated a lot of these stories. And now they hand me the bag to come out here and go, boo, sorry, the boogeyman ain't real, I guess.
okay.
The only thing that I'm aware of are the P plus 45s and the P plus 52s. The intergrades between them over the 7,000 years between them cannot be contacted per treaty. The P plus Orions I'm aware of, and the P plus 45 J-Rods. At the time the P plus 45s were around, they were unaware that the P plus 52 Orions, which would then be P plus 45 Orions, even existed. They didn't even know that they still survived at the time. And they only found out as a consequence of coming here in the treaty negotiations.
Okay, but what about you're telling me the Stargates were only used one way by...
Used two
by the
ways, but one
Orions.
way by transport for delegates in.
Okay.
And
from
that
other
was only
planets.
under extreme circumstances involving international uproar, where there were problems with the treaties. Aside from that, products were exchanged back and forth and information was exchanged. But it was deemed too dangerous to be handing people back and forth regularly. These things collapse, from what I understand, spontaneously. And if it collapses and you are not out one side or in the other, you're nowhere.
Okay, so you're telling me that these people had such a conscience, they were not sacrificing Americans or other, or military people to test the Stargates?
No, the treaties were basically inflicted on us by the Orions. As they were enforced upon us by the Orions that we needed to do what we needed to do, when they figured out that we weren't able to handle the issue ourselves, they looked at their own history and said, look at the cavemen and women. Okay? After we acted the way that we acted involving the cube and all of that business, they inflicted the treaty system on us. And they said, you will behave this way. We don't have the ability to just take a Stargate and to step through onto the other side without violating a treaty. They don't want us out there. We are dangerous to ourselves.
Okay.
So why would we not be dangerous to another culture? They are sure as hell not going to let us off this planet.
Can I ask you?
You should ask about Montauk and about Henry's experience.
Well, yes, but
I still, believe it or not, I still have not read about what Montauk is. And sitting here right now, I have zero clue what it even is.
Okay, that's cool. What about the Philadelphia experiment? You're familiar with that?
I'm familiar with the reports of the USS Eldridge.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the unified field theory testing that went on. In fact, the unified field theory testing did go on, but it made something which was, from what I understand, radar is visible, but not involving everything that I've heard all of these other movies about people going back to 1941 and prior to Pearl Harbor and all of this business, and walk through the time tunnel and all of this. The information that I've heard from the military sources, because I asked when I was in there, because I knew about the Philadelphia experiment from way back from hearing about it, that it was a legit experiment, that there was a legit experiment that went on, but it provided radar and visibility, and it was an early cloaking system, and it was electromagnetic cloaking.
Okay. Now I'm wondering what, certainly Kaela gave you sort of like hidden cards in your hand that allowed you to get information from Majestic, or to trade information with Majestic, such that you would learn what was going on in terms of the Stargates and various things.
And if I tell you, that means I'm telling that camera right there.
Yes. And okay. But if
and that one.
recently, I don't know if this is in the public domain, but recently you found out that MJ1 had not told you everything about a certain incident.
True.
Okay, which was a meteor, incoming meteor.
It was Apophis, and the big thing is the affidavit that I wrote and the dust-up that happened between he and myself was based on the fact that he said, and I told him not to lie to me again, and the reason why I told him not to lie to me again, it involved the time period where I was told to keep my mouth totally shut because of timelines. Then I found out that it was a bunch of garbage, basically just to manipulate me to keep my mouth shut. And after that happened, then more votes were taken, and then I was told to talk. I was given the orders to talk. Yo-yo, okay? When that happened, I told him, don't lie to me anymore. Tell me it's none of your damn business if you have to. I can accept that better than being lied to. It's more honorable.
Sure.
He said fine. Then I found out that because he had carried the attitude that the Magi were not closely watching anything which was like NEOs or any, the near-Earth orbiting asteroids or anything like that. They weren't concerned about it at all. Well, then subsequently during a conversation, I found out that in fact they were. This caused a mild dust-up, which was then heightened because of information from her relative. The information from her relative was in fact that they were aware that there would be an Islamic attack upon the United States as early, meaning they were aware as early as the mid-1990s that it would be coming sometime in the new millennium. Well, right on, smack on the beam. That made it worse. I had told him that if he ever lied to me again, I would make him pay a price for it. The simple price was naming him.
Okay, but
and after that, we've sent. There has been conversation with that particular individual since, and everybody's okay with everybody. I mean, 20 years, more than 20 years. I first met the gentleman at the back of the lambs in the museum. More than 20 years, since the mid-1970s. Relationship is not going to go by the wayside over a dust-up.
Sure, I understand. But the reason I'm alluding to that is that here's a case where
I know what you're alluding to.
Okay, where you don't know everything about what's happening, and you haven't necessarily been clued in to everything.
No, I haven't.
And so you are telling me that we don't go both ways in Stargates, and this is what you've been told. Okay, and you are telling me that there's only 2 races, maybe a third that's doesn't have
3 races plus us, maybe a 4th.
Okay, so all I can say here is this is interesting because we have gotten testimony from a lot of different witnesses, people who have different psychic abilities, who have come from the inside, from Black Ops, like our Henry Deacon, telling us that we are accessing Stargates constantly and going, in fact, between the Earth and Mars, and going between the Earth and the Moon, and possibly other places as well. In other words, not just that we're staying out of space or out of the Stargates because the Orions tell us to.
Well, they were used. They were used in timeline number 2 to gradually access Moon and Mars. Now, there is a possibility that the information that he has or has to do with a future timeline. That would make sense to me on that level, but not on the level of, hey honey, let's take the kids to Olympus Mons today.
No, but
No.
how about if the military is sending equipment back and forth,
Well,
et cetera, et cetera?
Okay. The Orions could trust us so much where they could hand us a cube and we misused it to the state that we misused it, where they then had to inflict a treaty system upon us.
Are they running our country? Are they running
No.
our world?
No, no. They're simply constraining what we're able to do. No. Now, we're running our own show down here, meaning when I say we, I'm not talking about the common folks that are, like being starved to death every day. We're running our own show politically down here. The statements about, well, these are mind-controlled this or that, automatons working for the ETs and the government. No, 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 no. These are good-hearted and black-hearted people, both, all fighting each other to run the geopolitical scenario. That is an honest, assessment from what I've seen what's going on. But we are constrained as to what we are allowed to do. Meaning where we are allowed presently to off-world.
I understand.
Very nice, very nice. We placed our hands on our hips, and underdog flew the American flag on the moon, and we showed ourselves so wonderful and all of that over the Soviets. But that doesn't mean that we're quite able at this point to go and camp out for too long.
Okay, so now you're telling me why we're not theoretically, or we haven't gone back to the moon, at least overtly.
We're busy, right? We're busy throwing sticks and stones at each other. And another reason why why we cannot go back there is part of the treaty system allows us to have a certain repository set somewhere on the moon, and that repository is presently there.
Okay.
And that is in case the T2 timeline should eventuate, or there should be a geological or a global catastrophe of like size.
Okay, which
And
is
it's
the
there-
arc, what you've called the arc.
Yeah.
Okay, which, from what I understand, used to exist here on the planet.
Well, in several pieces.
Right. Okay, so they took it up to the moon somehow.
Yeah, it was
It went through
assembled
the
and
Stargate?
no. That was going to. In fact, they were building equipment up north from here, and they ended up getting it about 3/4 of the way built. I actually told Bill Hamilton about this when we were walking on the Jeep Road out at Frenchman Mountain one night, and he says, "Well, where's it going to go?" I looked like that and kind of pointed up, and there the orb was heading. And he says, "Ah."
Okay, but you call it an arc. Is this something
Well, that's
that
a nickname
people,
for it.
But it sounds like it's going to save creatures.
It's got genetic and tissue and other products.
From us.
Yeah.
Okay, other creatures on the planet as
Oh
well,
yes.
animals,
Oh yes.
plants.
Yes. A very good biodiversity. Yes.
I see. And it's sitting on the moon in case there's something very bad that happens down here. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay. From the moon, where does it go?
It doesn't.
Oh, really? But the moon's not like, the most inhabitable planet. out
No, but it's the place that we're allowed to be right now.
Okay.
Do I sound like I'm weighing my words?
Yes, yes. Okay, well,
It's your job to ask the questions. It's my job to answer them as honestly and as truthfully as I am able
Okay.
while being honorable and beneficial.
Okay. And we do thank you for that. Regardless of what other people think.
Well, I mean,
There's a huge amount.
I know the exact spot that the thing is setting there. All right?
Yes.
I know what it looks like. I know how many pieces there are. I was involved in looking at and assisting with the biospherics on
Right.
it. I know exactly where it sets. And what happens if I say exactly where it sets and something happens to it?
Sure.
I can't take that on my back.
I understand.
Go back to the 50s here
right.
for a second. An interesting thing happened. We were talking about the cube and all of that, and the meetings with Eisenhower and the Orions, the delegates. An interesting thing, and I'm just referring to this, of course, because it happens to reference from the intelligence community the appropriate event, albeit it was being said at the time during a different context. This is referencing a hearing of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the nomination of Mike McConnell to be Director of National Intelligence, and this was at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, February the 1st, 2007. And Mr. McConnell, the Honorable Vice Admiral, said the following, quote, "Senator, some years ago, I think 50s, 60s, there was a battle in the community with regard to authorities for signals intelligence." Of course, signals intelligence, communication, and people can read between the lines, I think. "And decisions were taken finally to cause the director of the National Security Agency to have responsibility for signals intelligence, or SIGINT, as we refer to it, with regard to establishing priorities overseeing the technology, ensuring it's conducted in an appropriate way, the training standards are right, and investments are correct, and so on." I got a little report here, which was released on 17th February of 2003. This was actually sent to me by Bill Hamilton, and it was written by a person named Matt Guza. I don't know who the person is, aside from Director IC USUFOIC. And he reports the following. Aquarius background. Aquarius and other information. Says Aquarius findings briefly described below, because it was being, for some reason, Project Aquarius was being looked at very closely at the time. Number one, from what we have found, we believe that it started in 1953 alongside of the Project Blue Book ordeal. Now 53, let's think, what happened in 53? This is pretty much around the same time, general time frame as the Eisenhower thing, within a year. 53 was also the time when a certain craft dumped in Arizona, as I recall, right near Kingman, involving two P+45J rods and a P+52. The P45 was the one met by Bill Uhouse, and of course the P45 was the P52. I had the great honor. But the theory on the drawing board at this time is that it started as an USAF black project and was overtaken by the intelligence community due to the content and the secrecy. From investigating the past interest of the USAF and UFOs, it seems that the USAF weighed their investigation too much on non-scientific data. This would explain the need for the intelligence community investigation. So we can read between the lines here. Herein, after finding and seeing this, or due to other issues, the intelligence community took Aquarius out of the hands of the USAF. Isn't that funny how these two things coordinate with one another?
Well, what do you? Okay, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that
that there was an obvious illusion? There was an obvious allusion here in the testimony to the Honorable Vice Admiral McConnell,
right,
to situations which were going on during the 1950s involving the present relationship between we and the extraterrestrial species. Yeah.
Okay.
There seems to be a rather direct correlation here. And then the fact that later on during the intelligence community interview of Mr. McConnell, there was even an allusion to
the same time period.
well, to timeline changes Senator Rockefeller. This gives my heart good saying his name. I regret to say that my time has run out. And I think somebody's manipulating this clock because that much time hasn't gone by. Oh my heavens. And then a woman walked in who was from another committee. And that would be Susan Collins, I believe. But the fact that there was a manipulation of a clock comment going on and this, and there are several, well, I've got it tabbed up as to the relationships here, but what I'm trying to, I guess, show the folks is how things are said publicly.
Yes, absolutely. So, but what is interesting is how many in Congress know what's really being said.
Well, the head of the committee here, this committee was chaired by John D. Rockefeller IV, Democrat of West Virginia. And there is
I have no doubt that Rockefeller is in the loop. But
well, I have little doubt that he is in the loop as well. And may have been in the larger loop as opposed to not the Majestic 12 loop. Anyway.
Meaning a member of the Illuminati.
No. There was a larger group that existed between 63 and 67 properly in approximately 2002 called the Committee of the Majority.
Oh, okay. Okay, well then, all right.
I mean, you know, you got people like Rockefeller that can call the war that happened in 1991 as the Persian Gulf Procedure. That's right, he actually called it the Persian Gulf Procedure.
Fascinating.
It wasn't a procedure that I was in, but anyway.
Okay, well, we've heard that since then it's now called, there's 40 members, and it's called, isn't it the PI 40?
That's an
the new
old
name?
That's an old name.
That's an old name.
That's an old name for it.
So what you're saying, or what is being said here, is that there is some catastrophic events that have been mitigated to some degree, hopefully, by a certain amount of unity on the planet and a certain amount of effort towards the positive. And I'm assuming
And removal of equipment, yeah.
Okay, but they removed the equipment because the equipment told them to remove it? In other words,
They removed the equipment because the history indicated that the equipment was operating during the time of the catastrophe and was a proximate cause to the catastrophe by increasing the amount of energy into our asthenosphere and causing a global catastrophe.
Well, it's just that. In a sense, the equiment was telling, you know, it's almost like...
well, it was the equipment and it was the
2001.
delegates. It was also the delegates to the treaties and the representatives, including Kaila.
The Orions were saying, hey guys, it's the equipment, shut it down and you'll have better luck?
They were the leading force in that, yes.
Really? Okay, now I'm going to ask you something that may come across a little controversial, but what...
No, we have been talking about such prosaic items all evening.
No, but
I'm not certain I could...
What makes you think that they had our best futures in mind when they told us to turn that equipment off? In other words, why should we believe them?
Well, we should believe them simply because of the possibility and because we're talking about 4.5 billion up to 5 billion people here. All right. Now, let's think about this for a moment. If we leave the equipment in place and nothing happens, so what? What is the harm in removing it?
Right.
Now, that would be the corollary question to the question that you just asked. If they don't have our best interest at heart, how would our removing that equipment prevent the catastrophe that we're hearing about from 3 different cultures, meaning the Orions, the J-Rods, and the J-Rods from earlier times? How would removing that equipment proximate the catastrophe? Only leaving the equipment in place would be the dangerous move. So there's no harm in unloading a gun, but there is a possible harm in having it loaded.
Sure. It's like the joke of believing in God. It's like the Sufi joke about whether you believe in God or not. If you don't believe in God and there is no God, there's no harm. But if you do believe in God and there is a God, it's going to be a good thing in the end, right?
Well, may take you a few more trips back, but
Okay, so
I don't know. That's up to God.
right. Well, in a sense, that's what you're saying.
You know, this
You're
is
saying-
this is an issue of practicality.
Yeah.
You know, if we have a piece of equipment there that could possibly cause us harm, let's say they're wrong and it doesn't. You better pull it apart anyway. We're talking about the consequence of nearly 5 billion people.
Okay, what about
We would be
the
stupid
idea-
not to, in other words.
Okay, what about the natural stargates that still exist on the planet?
What has been heard from my background concerning the natural Stargate issue is what was going on at Frenchman Mountain. And to access that, they were using one of the Stargate devices. They had it
So
hauled
what
out
you're
there.
saying- okay, I mean, for example, Sedona has several vortexes.
Oh, sure, they're all over the place.
Yeah, and there are several natural vortexes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just to create even a cyclone or a hurricane creates a sort of a vortex.
Sure,
Okay,
Sure.
through which certain races can travel in their ships. It is said. Okay.
okay.
Do you have anything to say about that?
No.
Okay. Those are natural stargates.
Oh, the meaning a portal which does not require hardware?
Sure.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, I guess I could probably make some sort of a comment relative Lotus. There's a possibility that the portals that we're seeing during Project Lotus may be micro wormholes, and certainly, at least information is being carried through those portals from somewhere to here, and it's causing an effect in the environment. Now, we're assessing presently to see whether or not they are naturally produced. And in August, owing to certain circumstances, we're planning on running tests out at Frenchman Mountain to determine whether or not it is a natural phenomenon. Possibly.
Okay.
I mean, you could say that a travel in time could be a warp produced by a gravimetric device of a craft. You can move large distances in little to no time. So I'm not certain what the difference is physically or mathematically between that and what is being called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. You would need a physicist for that. I'm used to
Okay.
working on cells. And
Right. But, and in a sense, if Lotus is creating some kind of Stargate effect,
Oh, that's
even
wonderful.
micro wormhole,
that's wonderful if it is.
it is wonderful, but in a sense, you might also have to let go of Lotus in that sense if it is going to impact.
Oh, I have.
way-
I have. In fact, but for more tangible reasons. We brought the fine art of producing these portals for demonstration up to a science. We knew exactly what to do, know exactly what to do to propagate them with nearly 100% efficiency. They range in size, thus far that we've seen, between about 0.02 millimeters, so about 20 microns, to up to a millimeter. When we produce them now in the field, they're approximately a millimeter in diameter. And that's putting a heck of a lot of energy in, 50 times more energy than what we would do through the microscope. But we brought it to the point where it was a beautiful thing, where I could hook the right optics train on the scope, propagate with the use of a laser and electricity, and turn them on immediately on the surface of a silicate. And then we started getting things coming through on this end, or at least results in the medium around the crystal or around the silicate material that we were using, which were not normal. Cells of anomalous origin, self-organizing cells, which appeared to be organizing in one case. We did a variant of the ancient Lazzaro Spallanzani experiment. historic experiment concerning beef broth and to rule out spontaneous generation. And we had a very nice AB neuronal type pattern formed by cells that were self-organizing, and they were clearly morphologically they appeared like neurons in this soup that we had, and so we had some real problems developing. We had two other consequences where we had what were produced were anomalous cells of unknown quality.
You had life coming through.
Well, what we had is we had an organization, I think, going on this end. Now we're coming very close, and more is going to be said about a year about this, but we're coming close to determining the mechanism. And what it appears thus far is that there is an opening to a somewhere which is then placed in communication with our environment acoustically. And then there is a series of reactions with microshards of silicate material or microshards of quartz in our environment, which then become actually spontaneously or nearly so enclosed with material from our environment. And they move off to various locations and actually have effects on target cells in our environment. And so it's apparently based acoustically.
Okay, but that's understandable, although it's complex. And I'm not a biologist, so I don't pretend to understand all of it. But I understand where you're going with this. But but in essence, to get back to Stargates, because that's the subject of this.
Really? Am I still?
No, you're there. But the thing is that what I'm curious about
I'm loosening the lock on the camera, so it gradually.
is I'm actually curious whether or not these natural stargates that do occur in nature are not being accessed by beings, whether they be the Orions or whoever, at will, into this dimension.
I've got no information that the P-52 Orions or P-52J rods or the P-45J rods are accessing such a system, save the use of time travel technology, gates to move from one spot to another, and then the use of craft for moving from there to here. Meaning from a spot in reticulum, for instance, to a place in the Aquarius system, Gliese, or however it's properly said, and then, which is the origin of, from what I understand, of Project Aquarius itself, because they were known to be coming from that direction. And that is, I believe, in the Aquarius constellation. But
because they're not
they use craft then to move from there to here, but they're using a gravimetric technology to warp time-space. So I suppose that could be the same use, but I don't think it's a situation kind of like, you walk out into a wilderness and you see a whole parade of people coming through a Stargate with 4 heads and 16 eyes and things like that.
What about a whole parade of crafts?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's the best answer I can give. Most honest one I can give. I don't know. I have not, in 20 years of history, of history with Majestic, heard of anything like that from them, meaning as part of either a treaty system or an ongoing operation. However, I've also heard reports of craft being seen in the sky. I've seen craft in the sky, which I was not directly involved, like the May Boyer Park incident in '73. I've seen what I believe. Well, I have to say lights in the sky, not craft.
We've seen. Come on, we've seen.
She has seen craft, and she's not feeding me full a line of bull.
You can stare at the sky and see the crafts zipping around.
Well, there are meteors too, and there are also experimental aircraft. Of various types. There are also back-engineered aircraft, which are being spotted too. The triangles.
All I'm saying is that according to what you're saying, there is a treaty in which we had stargates or access to wormholes that we mechanically opened and closed.
Yes.
Based on a treaty system in which we were allowed to get information and send information back and forth, but that we didn't use to go out, but they used to come in. is what you're telling us.
Substantially, yes.
Okay, but we've closed all those down,
Yes.
according to what you're telling us.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm asking.
Where's the yellow book? No.
No, but but there are natural stargates out there that they can use anytime they want. So they no longer have use of our stargates. So it's in a sense of a treaty.
Well,
They have access anywhere.
okay, if they
anytime.
do, let's posit if they do for a moment. The ones that we have to be concerned about would be the P-45s.
Okay.
Because they are looking to justify their own history. They would be very happy, aside from being paid off constantly, they would be very happy to see their own history justified.
How are they paid off?
They're paid off with technology, with assistance. In the past, they were paid off with a certain number of abductions per year.
What would they do with those people?
Aside from a longitudinal genetic drift study, that's enough. You know, some of them were literally handed over, and I consider it illegal, and I consider it a violation of international law. I consider it a crime against humanity, and that's why I did what I did to stand up against it as best as I could and to get it off the books.
What about the idea that some P-45s have shape-shifted, you know, excuse the terminology, but into human form, are here working in the government under a human form, furthering their own, you know, demands on history?
It is a substantial probability that they have the ability, because I've interacted with ones that would ostensibly look human. And I really don't like talking about the so-called man in black or men in black.
Right, but I understand when you talk
phenomenon.
about the men in black, those were people that are beings that, you know, and you went in our last discussion into quite a description of that kind of being. But I'm talking about somebody who is acting like you and me, looking like you and me, absolutely undetectable.
No.
And still could be furthering, or could even be.
If they are, they're not J-rods. If they are, they're not J-rods. Orions, possible. They are very, very brilliant people. The short interactions, very short interactions that I had with them, I was impressed, whereas I would not want to be spending that much time around P-45s at all. I would have enjoyed. In fact, I would have felt privileged speaking with them further.
Are you talking about, when you say Orions, are you talking about the Nordics?
I think that's how they're usually they've been called talls or tall.
Yeah, but I mean,
they're
cameras
essentially you know, the anthropomorphic, very tall human beings with blonde hair, very large eyes, very blue, pretty eyes. Larger than our eyes, as in ratio to cranium size. The orbits are larger, etc. Just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant people. And what I found most intriguing about them is how they modulated what I consider their brilliance through emotion. The emotions coming from them were so less rudimentary. They were so more complex than what even I experienced with Kaela. I would have really enjoyed spending some more time with them.
Okay, but they're here on this planet interacting with us, isn't it?
Well, they interacted with us. I'm not certain if there are presently any on Earth or not right now.
Okay.
I would say that you know, they're 50,000 years, a little more than that, ahead of us. Given the similarity between body structure, between size even and body structure, cephalothoracic to thoracic ratio, similar enough. I think they could probably, if their eyes didn't look the way their eyes look, they could probably get away with walking around. Okay. But their eyes are they're way larger than ours, and they look like essentially like these Bratz dolls that the little tween girls are going after nowadays. You know, the eyes are too large. You see these eyes, these hypersized eyes? I mean, it's fine on a Bratz doll, but if you walk this thing out onto the street, it's going to get picked out very quickly.
Okay.
So I just don't think so. Now, I at the same time, I have to say, are they smart enough to probably get away with it? Figure out how? Maybe. Maybe. I doubt it, personally, because I've met a lot of very interesting, but a few strange people in the last 4.5 years, talking with the public, who believe that there are literally reptilians walking around that are wearing masks and things like that. No. I'm a little more rooted in reality. I hate to put it that way, but no. I joked with her that I wanted to do something over at the first place where we were at for my debriefing. I said, when the debriefing gets done, what I wanted to do is I wanted to hire some special effects people for real. Would end the debriefing, and then we would stop, and then we would begin filming with another camera. And I was just suggesting a joke. It never got pulled off. Somebody, what I was going to do is have a special effects person work me up with my face over the top of a reptilian face, and I was going to rip it off and go, God, I'm tired of these human masks. And just have this little segment put out there as a joke. But she told me that people would take it seriously.
People would believe it. You can't do that.
Yeah.
People will believe it.
It's true.
I don't know. I've got a strange sense of humor, I guess.
Okay, but you had a dealing with P-45s, P-52s, and these beings their treaty system is being adhered to because they are here in underground bases, monitoring us at all times. Because otherwise, how do they know that we are abiding by a so-called treaty? Because supposedly we broke treaties. Isn't this right?
Well, we have strained. We have strained the treaty system more than once. So have the P-45s.
Right. So
we have in fact come into conflict with one another at certain times. These conflicts have been amicably resolved. And we are presently in an amicable state with one another.
The P-47 is often mentioned in UFO conspiracy circles as a species of extraterrestrials, though there is no solid evidence or official acknowledgement of their existence. In some of these narratives, the P-47 were described as an advanced alien race, possibly connected to secret government projects or even interacting with humans at various points in history. Their exact appearance and characteristics vary depending on the source, but they are sometimes depicted as being highly intelligent and technologically advanced. Some conspiracy theorists link the P-47 to other well-known extraterrestrial species, such as the Greys or J-Rods, suggesting that the P-47 may have similar goals or roles in terms of influencing human affairs or conducting research on Earth. There are claims that the P-47 might be involved in manipulating timelines or guiding humanity in ways that align with certain agendas, particularly in connection with the alleged government programs like Project Looking Glass or other extraterrestrial interactions.
We're not the only ones with the looking glass technology that can look into other timelines. In other words, they have the equipment too.
Sure.
And so it's not that difficult for those who might be wishing to enforce the treaty on their great-great ancestors, to look into the present time as an expression of them looking into their own past and watching it change.
Okay, so in a sense you're saying they know what we're going to do before we do it.
They know the probabilities. And so they are substantially capable of interacting with us if they feel that those probabilities are moving to eventuate their own history as they have it written for them as being an
so
outcome. And
in other
they
words,
find that, the
they're
P-52s find that as an unacceptable outcome.
So they're pushing their advantage whenever they can.
They're pushing the advantage of not justifying their own past so that they may either split off on their own timeline, but that their own history would not eventuate a catastrophe. Now, if you consider that pushing their own advantage, sure. Now, the P-45s, the characterization that you placed pushing their own advantage, I would say that that was an appropriate characterization.
Well, I
that
was
they would be,
talking about that.
yeah. The P-52s are much more amicable and a little farther along. I just say that they're a little more spiritually adept, the P-52 Orions, certainly more than the P-45 J-Rods. They're extremely mechanical, very, very logical, yet ruthless. Extremely.
Meaning, you're speaking of the P-45.
Yeah, they have no problem picking up somebody like me out of the middle of a park and shoving a probe up his wazoo to test him, yeah. Yeah, they've got no problem with that at all. I have, however, a substantial problem with that, and I think other folks who have been largely abducted, not everybody, but you know, a fair number of them also have a problem with that.
Okay, what about the idea that we have somebody, Jim Sparks, I don't know if you know who he is, he's written a book called The Keepers recently.
I'm aware of Jim Sparks, as he is the personal friend of a couple of folks with whom we became close acquaintances. Okay.
Okay, so he's telling us that he has conscious recall of his abduction experiences, and that groups of people were abducted by what sounds like P-45s because they have real issues with control. And put in front
Boy,
of
that was said nicely.
and put in front of computer screens and shown, scenes of the Earth. First a beautiful Earth and potentially, fantastic futures, and then shown the opposite of that, so that what would be generated in these people is a love of the planet and a desire to make it a better place.
And also there is an aim to this. They are aware that our emotions affect our state, our physical state, that our orientation to the energies which are available from the cosmos, if you will, affect the state of our DNA, affect the state of our health, and they are applying that as an experimental protocol, a rubric, if you will, to change the state of the people on board so that they can sample them for biological material. The fact of what we take away from it is aside the point. That is just whatever we take away, and then it's our take on it, and then a person, an experiencer, if you will, then goes off into our world and says how he or she feels about the experiment, or about what they were subjected to, or about what they were shown. But there's a cold, hard, cruel reality involved here that we are being picked up for biological material as an experimental protocol.
Okay, meaning what these people that are being abducted are doing is providing, DNA, providing eggs and sperm so that they can, experiment or create their own future beings?
What they're trying to do is they're trying to ameliorate their own neuropathology, which is already starting and is becoming an issue within their populace at their timeline concerning reproduction.
But how many people do they need to figure that out?
Well, as many as what they wanted to take until they get the answer figured out, and they really don't care, because it's the old proposition of the anthill along the side of the road in Africa. We are to them, from their perspective, the ants on the anthill, and how would we feel about stepping on one or two ants or a few million ants out of an anthill? It may cause a few people with, I consider, higher intelligence, some moral problems just stepping on them, but, you know, how much would we really care about that? They feel that way about us. They want to use us as biological material, watch us get destroyed to justify their own background, their own history, and at the same time take the biological material from us and solve their own personal present problems.
Okay, but how are we fighting them?
What do you mean?
In other words, you've just told me they have a tremendous amount of control. They're abducting huge number of people and they're continuing their experiments.
Well, they have. The numbers who are being abducted now are not treaty related. In other words, there is nobody being taken presently. 0 authorized by treaty. I can't stop them from taking people out of their beds at night, but I did influence the other. Is it rolling?
I'm rolling.
Yep.
Because H.G. Wells, the epilogue in his Time Machine, the Time Machine by H.G. Wells, I keep this on my desk.
Okay.
It says, one cannot choose but to wonder, will he ever return? It may be that he swept back into the past and fell among the blood-drinking, hairy savages of the age of unpolished stone, into the abyss of the Cretaceous Sea, or among the grotesque saurians, the huge reptilian brutes of the Jurassic times. He may even now, if I may use the phrase, be wandering on some plesiosaurus-haunted oolitic coral reef, or beside the lonely saline lakes of the Triassic Age. Or did he go forward into one of the nearer ages in which men are still men, but with the riddles of our own time answered and its wearisome problems solved? Into the manhood of the race, for I, for my own part, cannot think that these latter days of weak experiment, fragmentary theory, and mutual discord are indeed man's culminating time. I say for my own part, he I know, for the question had been discussed among us long before the time machine was made, thought but cheerlessly of the advancement of mankind and saw in the growing pile of civilization only a foolish heaping that must inevitably fall back upon and destroy its makers in the end. If that is so, it remains for us to live as though it were not so. But to me the future is still black and blank, is a vast ignorance, lit at a few casual places by the memory of his story. And I have by me for my comfort 2 strange white flowers shriveled now, and brown and flat and brittle, to witness that even when mind and strength had gone, gratitude and a mutual tenderness still lived on in the heart of man. That means a lot to me. I actually hold on to that, and I hold on to that so much as such a prescient bit of thought that I actually keep the flowers from my great-grandmother's grave in there with it. You know, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, and all I can do is hope like everybody else and pray like everybody else.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. You know, and I understand that we've actually overtaxed you and asked you, you know, an incredible amount of information here, and you've been very generous, and I really want to thank you.
Well, it's my responsibility to say truth.
Okay. Well, you definitely do that, and what I would like to also say is, how do we fight them? For the people that are out there, and what we know is unity is one way in which we are progressing out of a certain timeline into another, right?
Yes.
Okay. But if you have
It's-
anything
it's-
else
it's-
to add to that
I would like
for
to add
people,
something.
Well, to
Okay.
me, it's unit.
Constant vigilance.
Yes.
constant vigilance.
That's good. That's very good. Constant
Okay.
vigilance. Also, there are many operatives, not just like Marcia and myself, but many operatives who are coming out of the old Majestic who have had experiences like this. Most of those operatives are not willing to say anything. However, that doesn't mean that they're not doing things. We are acting in concert with some of those operatives and with other groups to try to motivate the information from the inside, which could be used for the beneficial application for humanity, to humanity. And we're doing our very best to motivate that through. And some of it is being seen in very little snippets of it, the projects that we're proposing that are going to be coming in the future, like Argo and ISIS. I guess the only thing I can really say, aside from the constant vigilance, is to act to the right. When a wrong needs to be righted, or there needs to be a stand taken for what is right versus wrong, that our present time doesn't mean that that we're so modern we have to get rid of the ideal for the real. We create our own reality, and so we should, in my view, act toward the ideal to create a better real for ourselves.